Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Dying Your Way podcast. I have a very special guest today, Jean Kittson. Jean Kittson is a well-known comedian in Australia and beyond, and is hysterically funny. We may be talking about some things today that aren't so funny, but I found out about Jean Kittson when I ran across her book, We Need to Talk About Mom and Dad. And I looked through that book in the bookstore and saw the contents, and I was just struck by your experience, how identical it was to my experience in Texas with both of my parents. And you have all of the Australian information in that book, and the chronology of it goes from here we got this diagnosis, here are the things that aren't working right, to where you are right now, and the incredible amount of research and detail that you've put into that book, filled with so many hysterical pieces of laughter. I mean, we need that. We're going through it for sure. So welcome, Jean Kittson, to the Dying Your Way podcast. We are so thrilled to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. I'm thrilled to be on. Thank you.
Well, okay, before we even start talking about the book, I know that you are in the middle of a lot going on with both of your parents and God knows what else right now. Do you want to just let us know how you are doing right now?
I'm okay, actually. Thank you for asking. I know that, you can really be pulled in so many directions as a baby boomer. I'm sure, I don't know whether you call them those in the States, but here we're called baby boomers.
Same thing.
And we're the sandwich generation. So like me, I've got work. Well, it was full-time work until COVID, and I've got two daughters who have moved back home. One's 22, one's 28. And an hour and a half away, I have two elderly parents. My mum's 96 and my father, he's 93. He's her toy boy. So they live independently, but they have a lot of care coming to their home. They have a unit in a retirement village. So you're always sort of running between these different responsibilities and trying to make sure that you do the right thing and you don't drop any balls, or with the spinning plates, you don't let any plates smash. And that's why really I wrote the book, because I'd written a book about menopause, and I was speaking to a lot of women who were going through menopause. They had kids at home, and they had full-time jobs, and they had elderly parents, and it was the elderly parents that was giving them the night sweats. It was the elderly parents that were causing them the most sleepless nights, because you feel if you make a mistake with loved ones at this stage of their lives, that the consequences are going to be terrible for them. You might miss some illness they have, or some discomfort. You might not have got things in place to support them. They might break something because you didn't think about moving a mat or something. You know, everything seems to be loaded with consequence at this end of their lives.
Yeah. So when you started realizing that your parents needed this extra support, I'm guessing that it was a few years ago, and this has been going on for you for years. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, when I looked back, when I first started talking about my aging parents, I realized it was 25 years ago. My dad was 75 or something. And now and at that stage, I was about 45. But now I'm 65. I'm thinking, 75 isn't that old? Why was I worrying then? But he was, getting on the roof and cleaning out the gutters. And when his, hips were 20 years younger than he was, or 40 years younger than he was. So I was worried about them even at that age. But I could have started worrying a little bit prematurely. But then again, I think, well, because I've been involved in their health and their care, and I've been concerned and I care, because I care.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the reasons they're still alive at 96 and 93, is they've had the support of the family. And we've been monitoring their health and making sure that things weren't missed, and maybe they moved. I thought that we might have moved them out of their family home. Not we moved them, but encouraged them to move it maybe a little prematurely. But now, but they've had 7 years to settle into a retirement village, and that is where this place has come into its own with all its support and
that's going well so far. The retirement village is going well.
yes, well, they have lovely people who live around them, and there's you know, care buttons, and people maintain their small garden. But one of the aspects of my book is not only how to manage all the practical side of aging, but looking at how we treat our elderly overall. Why have we got to a point where we put them with, where we outsource their care, where we put them with each other and not with us? Why aren't they part of our community anymore? Why do we put them in these sort of colonies of old people when all they have in common is their age? You know, they might have completely different life experiences. So although it's convenient, and it's for their, probably for their own protection, is this the right way to go with our elderly? We used to take babies away from mothers and thrust them into a little crib where you could look at them through the window for their own protection at the beginning of life, and we don't do that anymore. So why are we whisking our elders away at the end of life for their own protection?
Your parents seem to be have the kind of capacity that they can really still be in charge and say what they want and what they need. Have they put their end of life plan in place so when they don't have capacity, do you know what they want when they need it?
Well, I know what my mother wants. She's extremely outspoken, and she's very considered and sharp in what she says. So, and also because she's been in hospital at what we thought was the end of her life a couple of times. So she's done a couple of advanced directives. Do you know the advanced, know the advanced directives? And I don't know what they're called for anyone watching in the States, but
yeah,
they're called the same thing.
Yeah, advanced care planning, advanced care plan, directive. I mean, yeah.
Well, what I discovered writing the book is an advanced directive in Australia is the legal vehicle where you make your wishes known should you ever lose capacity to speak for yourself. And that advanced directive, it has to be witnessed and signed by you and a witness, and it has to be gone through with a doctor. You have to understand what you are saying about the treatments you are agreeing to or not agreeing to. Yeah. And an advanced care plan, though, that's really a different sort of thing. So we don't really see the difference. We talk about it as one thing, but when I was writing the book, I found that they were two different things. One is the legal document that will be in the room with palliative care nurses and doctors, with your end of life specialists, hopefully, who are making decisions, and the treatment will always be nuanced anyway. It will always be whatever's best for you as a patient. But if two family members, it's really a document in case two family members come in and one says, oh my God, I just heard about another treatment, and I want my mother to have that. And if the other daughter's going, oh no, or son's going, no, she doesn't want that, you've got this document. But an advanced care plan is more like, how do you see the end of your life? What is important to you?
Values.
Do you want to be home? Your values.
Yeah.
What do you think you would like to die at home, or would you like more with care, or would you like lots of people around you, or just your family? Just getting an overall idea of how you see the end of your life.
Well, I think the difference is that you are there, you've got two siblings, you care, and it sounds like your parents have done the planning and those things are in place. So you could expect a likely positive outcome to, when they actually do transition. Most people don't have that.
No, well, my father doesn't like to talk about death and dying. He cries now. Oh. So my big advice to everyone is start early when you're not feeling so vulnerable and you're not right at the end of your life.
Yeah.
And my sister, who works in disabilities, she's had some good conversations with them. So we know what mum wants. We know what she doesn't want. That's easy. With my father, it's much less clear because he's distraught about it. And that breaks my heart, because suffering we talk about suffering at the end of life, but most of the time, if you have good specialized palliative care, you won't suffer.
Right.
But you can, but suffering is not always caused by pain or physical discomfort. Suffering can be caused by
Emotion.
how you are letting go, emotional, spiritual, whether things are resolved. And my father said to me the other day, he said, I really want to talk to you about, there's some things I need to talk to you about, Jean. And one of them is where we're going to be buried. And I said, oh, I thought my sister talked to you about that. I thought you wanted to be buried, even though he hasn't been to a Catholic church since he married my non-believing mother and was excommunicated. I thought you wanted to have a fully consecrated, be buried in consecrated grounds and have a mass. And he said, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want to talk about where I said, great, let's talk about it. He said, well, not now. We'll talk about it next week. So
sometimes it's just like little baby steps to get to that conversation, but at least he's saying he wants to talk about it, right?
Yeah, well, he does. And it is baby steps. And often the conversation will go pear-shaped, and you have to have it over and over again until you slowly get down to it. But that will relieve a lot of his suffering, I think, if he knows where he's going to be put to rest, as we used to say, where his body will be, whether I thought he didn't want to be cremated, but apparently that's open to consideration now. My mother is clear. She wants to be cremated, and she wants her ashes scattered at sea, accompanied by a lone piper, who apparently then has to swim back to shore. So she's not even Scottish. I don't know why she wants a lone piper. But anyway, that's her fancy. But Dad, we have to get, and it's really, but then, I'm reminded of Bob Hope. When he turned 100, his wife said to him, where do you want to be buried? And he said, surprise me.
Yeah. My mom ended up on Mount Shasta, so there you go.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah, she always wanted to go, but yeah, we had to kind of smuggle her ashes up there, because technically you're not supposed to do that in a national park, but we did. What I really wanted to talk to you about, Jean, today, because I think what you're showing us is a model of the best kind of care, of the ways that we can support our parents, and that's by loving, that's by caring, that's like being their eyes and ears, while still giving them the most independence and empowerment at the same time. But the reality is talking about elder abuse, and you had a chapter on that in your book, and it just took my breath away, because I did not have the courage to go there when I was writing my Dying Your Way portal program. It had all of the chronological things that, your book had. It was very practical, but I knew I needed to write something about that, and I just did not have the courage to go there. So I would love to talk about it if you're comfortable with it. I've brought up some statistics that are really alarming. And I'll just start with that 17% of people over 60 years old, that's you and me, are going to suffer some sort of abuse. And as the resources get diminished, whether it's because of COVID or overstressed facilities, or, sandwich generation baby boomers, I mean, we can just be so many places at so many times, the level of that is going to go up, and it's very underreported, but 1 in 24, is a pretty good estimate of what's going to happen. So you talked about it in your, I'll just let you kind of riff on it yourself, but I know you talked about the evil relatives. And you talked about Catherine's story. And if you could just talk to us a little bit about that, I'd love to hear.
Which one was Catherine's story again? Is
Yeah.
that, oh yes, I remember.
Yeah.
So because I had to change everyone's name for my book. So
I figured.
I know their real name, but I'm thinking, oh no, which one was Catherine? Which real person was Catherine?
We can call her Penelope, and any name you want to call her.
Elder abuse is huge. I would have thought it was more prevalent than those statistics. And I think a lot of elders don't report abuse, especially when it involves their family, because they do not want at this end of their lives for their families to fall out, for their families to get in trouble, for them to be fighting. Our elders, let's face it, are hugely vulnerable at this age. And a lot of elders in Australia, because of what's happened to the real estate prices, they're living in homes that are suddenly, they might have bought for $30,000 and now they're worth $1 million. They're living in homes that are of great value. So suddenly, you know, kids, you know, who said, oh, you know, we don't care about our parents' will or what they're, you know, or what they're leaving us. Their house is worth what? You know, and then they start going, what? So there's the family side, and then there's all the other ways they can be abused, the cold calling, the people who pretend to be on their side and who aren't. And Catherine's story, there's a few stories in there and they're heartbreaking. Catherine's story, the favorite child lived overseas in New York, I think. And he came back to Australia where there was another sister and brother, and the mother was living independently in her own apartment. She had organized, she was running her own life. She had her own care coming in, her own cleaning, her own help around the house. She went down the street every day to a local village and had her coffees and got her shopping, and she was completely independent. This son turns up, but she had quite a bit of money. This son turns up, and then he's a golden-haired boy, and she welcomes him home. And then in the course of him visiting, he says, I'll sign here, Mum. And she basically signed over all she gave him enduring power of attorney. So you have to look at these legal vehicles and how they're really important. They can work for you when you understand, when you know what they are. They can work against you in the wrong hands. An enduring power of attorney, if you sign that over to one of your children or anyone, they can make decisions, legal, financial decisions for you. They can make decisions about where you live. And that's what he did. He said, took her for a little drive to a nursing home, which is a residential aged care, and dropped her off, then sold her flat, cashed in all her goods. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted. And her sister, the family were horrified, and her sister particularly. And she tried a lot of avenues to get justice for her sister, because when she was moved to this nursing home, she didn't know why she was there. She couldn't get out again. She didn't have the resources to get out. She didn't know why she was there or how long she was there. And it turned out that the solicitor, and even then it was really hard to do anything about it because it was a fait accompli in the end. But in the end, the solicitor who drew up all the papers was basically working for the son. He wasn't working for the mother. He wasn't the mother's list. So in my book, I just give you all the information that your loved one needs and you need, so that your loved one is more protected, has more control, not less. So understanding these legal vehicles, getting your own solicitor to protect you, having maybe an accountant who you've had for years to be a co-executor of your will to stop all the fighting and the abuse that happens then. Like my accountant, he got a phone call from one of his client's sons and said, oh, you know, say Dorothy's just passed away. Now my accountant had known Dorothy for years and years, was her accountant. He said, that's terrible. And the son said, yes, have you got her will? And he said, oh, I'll find, you know, he was an executor of the will. I'll find the will and I'll get it for you. But he knows what's going on. He does his due diligence. So he rang the daughter of the woman that had just died. And she said, well, how did you know Mum had died? She only died 5 minutes ago. I'm still in the hospital with her. So that
Oh,
is a
oh, oh, that's not
so
good.
no. And my parents the other day, from strangers, had a phone call about someone wanting to clean their air conditioning for $250, just sign here. And there are stories about people, people finding out from different groups from the local club or something like that you're on your own, and befriending them, and then telling, especially if you're a man or a woman, just being the new friend who says, don't tell your family, they wouldn't understand, and then fleecing them. So
My
elder
mother,
abuse, yeah.
I mean, I have a personal experience of it, but I have seen it so often. My mother was in a retirement village, and a maintenance man was coming around, and he was, you know, hired by this retirement village. And evidently, my mother, who was in the early stages of Alzheimer's, very cute, very cute, she would she introduced me to him. I lived in California. She was in Texas, so I wasn't there often. And she told me that he was going to marry her and they were going to leave the retirement village. Well, I was horrified, and I'd started doing my own investigation. And he was married. He was just trying to take her for her money. And, of course, I stepped forward very strongly. It broke my mother's heart, but it was something that, you know, you just have to step up and do. And I think that's the challenge, is finding the people, have a circle of people around you that you trust, that are also watching the others. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You
It
just,
really does take, we all talk about a village. It takes a village to raise a child. Well, it also takes a village to make sure that your elderly loved one reaches safe harbor at the end of their lives. You need a lot of people supporting you and keeping an eye on, and supporting you and your parents, your elderly loved ones, and keeping an eye on them. But that isn't always possible. And for instance, my parents, everyone around them is elderly. So, and the man next door just lost his wife during this whole lockdown thing, which was, so that's why it doesn't always work just putting our elders into communities with each other. It's much better how they do it in Europe, in villages around Europe, for instance, where the elders are part of the village community. And there's area, I don't know whether you've heard about them, but there's areas called blue zones. And the blue zones in the world are where people live long lives and happy lives, and they're the happiest. And
Sardinia,
they're always,
yeah,
yeah,
Sardinia, Okinawa, the
yeah.
Blue Zone.
That's right. There's different ones around the world, and it's always about them remaining connected to their community, their family, feeling their life has purpose, and having a spirituality of some sort, having a faith of whatever that is, and just being connected with other people, as I said, feeling that they have value. And it's really hard. Like, that would have been devastating for your mum, because my parents already feel, my dad already says, I feel so silly, I should have been able to do this myself, I could have done this myself a few months ago, whatever it is, fixing mum's talking books or whatever. So they feel really diminished when people take advantage of them too, because it wouldn't have happened once, and they would have seen it once, or they would have been in a better, more position to see someone trying to con them.
Yeah. I mean, there's neglect that also happens, and that is very common, the more institutionalized that they are. And even the people that are caring for them, doing self-reporting, 2/3 of them self-report to being neglectful, not because they want to necessarily, but because resources that are available. And that was another alarming statistic that just blew my
Well,
mind. And I have to say, in Australia, you guys have so much better health care than what is available for the United States. But when it comes to going into transitioning into assisted living and long-term care and all of that, it's a lot more straightforward. The way in Australia that I don't understand the formulas or what is necessary to unload your resources and what the wait times and things that it takes to get into um, you know a good
yeah.
home. I mean, that seems sort of painful to observe from my point of view.
Well, there's two sort of different levels. There's the government realizes they're going to save a lot of money if people stay in their own homes for longer, and they deliver care to people's homes
Mm-hmm.
rather than have them going to nursing homes or residential aged care. That's more expensive. For example, the top level of home care packages, if you're a home, is a level 4, and it's basically that's as high as you can go. That's palliative care, but the government only gives you $182 a day at home. In a retirement, in a residential aged care, the government has to pay the residential aged care place, a nursing home, at least $262 a day for their care alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cheaper to keep our elders at home. But then again, to qualify for home care packages, you have to ring up. You have to understand what they're saying on the phone. This is where an advocate for our elders is everything. Like everyone, no matter what area I talked about for elder care, everyone said they pity the elder who hasn't got an advocate because they would have no hope at all. And that's dealing with everything. So when we ring up our government, our bureaucracy, Centrelink, which provides an assessment to see what level you're at, and then it assesses the elders, and mum's a level 3 now and dad's a level 2. You get the assessment, then you have to wait for an allocation, and so that all takes time. So you wait for the assessment to come in, then the assessor comes, then you wait for the outcome, then you get told you're a level 2 or 3 or 4, and then you wait for an allocation. There have been people who have died waiting for a level 4 care.
Yeah.
Because that can be 1 or 2 years wait. So there's real flaws in the system, and chronic underfunding. And then the other level of care is when you have to go into a residential aged care. And a lot of us will have to, at some point, say we can no longer manage the care of our elders, and they are better off with professional care in a nursing home. But nursing homes are absolutely underfunded in Australia. They have the ratios of registered nurses to patients was eradicated in 1997. So some nursing homes have one registered nurse to 90, 100, 150 residents.
Wow.
One registered nurse. They don't, in New South Wales, they don't even have to be on 24 hours. So you can have a registered nurse on for 8 hours and then she's on call. And the rest of the care are they're called assistants in nursing. They get $23 an hour. They're a Cert 3, I think. They get less than pulling beers in a pub. They often have English as a second and third language. They often work in different nursing homes because they're casual workers, and they'll get 6 hours here and 6 hours there. They often work 12, 13 hours a day to support their family because $23 an hour doesn't go very far. Most of them are really compassionate and caring, and like their job and are happy to do their job. But then there's this percentage where our elders get abused, and that's been horrible to watch. It's been horrible to see what's happened with COVID, but there's a lot of explanations for that too, and it all comes down to the fact that the federal government runs residential aged care and the state governments run hospitals. So you'd understand that in the States, because you got even more states than we have. It's like mayhem.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, it's I was fortunate. My mother and father both went in and out of assisted living, long-term care, hospital, back home. I mean, that happened back and forth probably, 11 times each for both of them. But
Oh, right.
I was able to get them a hospice diagnosis. My mother, 6 years before she died, and my father, 2.5 years before he died. Now, daddies went in and out of hospice because you have to be at a certain level to qualify. But my mother was continually declining, and so they would re-up her every 6 months. But that was an extra set of eyes and ears wherever my parents were, of somebody going in and visiting just them, no other patients, just them.
Yes.
So, I mean, I am distraught to see everywhere that there's not public policy in place to get palliative care earlier and hospice care earlier without this stigma of you have to be dying to have it, because that was the difference for me.
Yeah, you're so lucky, because I've been, my interest in death and dying, I suppose, really was stimulated when I was, in 2011, I was asked to MC a palliative care conference. And I'd never talked about death and dying. It was like, my family were we never were brought up to talk about it. We always, change the subject, oh, your father's died, oh look, a puppy, like that's how we handled it. We just couldn't sort of face it. So me learning about palliative care and death, and speaking openly about death and dying and how to manage it and make it a really good part of life and make it as good as possible, was just sort of an eye-opener to me. But at these conferences, I learned that in Australia, you sort of go 66666 line palliative. Instead, what they like is, I don't know whether I can do it on Zoom, but you bring in palliative care small and then you increase it till it's all palliative, but it blends with normal care. So you have care and palliative happening, just your normal GP and a bit of palliative care. It's not like end of life. It comes in, I have a friend who's got Parkinson's, and I think it would be really good if she had a few talks with palliative care people, just to see how it's just to know what the journey is going to be like, and know what to expect and plan, have more control.
And it makes those transitions as that level of care goes up for each new condition that happens. If you get palliative care early, it makes it more seamless and not so abrupt and, I've got to move all of a sudden from here to there. And every time there's a transition, things tend to get muddy and fall apart. And it would just, to have that thorough through line going all the way through from a terminal or life-threatening diagnosis to, when you finally do pass, let's do some public policy around that and change it,
Yeah, exactly.
To me, it's so obvious.
You might have read that story of a friend of mine. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she had it for years and years and years, and she had a specialist. So she was hanging, this specialist was her lifeline, literally. She was with this specialist, with this specialist, with this specialist, and then finally the specialist said, the gynecological oncology specialist said, there's nothing I can do for you anymore. You need to see a palliative care team. And my friend was devastated. Like, there's treatment, then stop. Can't do anymore. Now you better see the people who take care of you dying. Yeah. It was absolutely crushing for her. She felt abandoned. She thought they didn't care anymore. They'd written her off, that this specialist, and if she had these wonderful palliative care specialists just talking to her all the way through, and if she recovers, fantastic, and if she doesn't, they're there.
Yeah.
And to have those sort of people at the end of your life, like, I would love my parents to have them now, but there's not enough funding for that either. There's very few. This is what the residential aged care places are saying too. By the time, because of home care packages, by the time people go into nursing homes, they're palliative, but there's no extra funding to train people up in palliative care, and by then they've got very complex needs, and people aren't trained in it. So I think it would be wonderful to blend this, and maybe we do have to change the name from palliative care, because it scares so many
Well,
people.
palliative care is, I mean, to me, it's not hospice. It's just an interdisciplinary team of people that come in. And hospice is when you actually are in a terminal condition, and it's like when you are actually literally dying, but you don't have to be dying to be in pain. I mean, to be pain-free. You can get pain-free, care here too.
Oh,
So,
of
yeah,
course, you should be managed properly
all
and
the time.
supported for as long as you need to be, and starting when you need it.
And I love
And
when you said you wrote the book about taking care of your parents, so your children would know how to take care of
yeah,
you.
that's right. I really wrote it for my children. Yeah,
I
that's right.
totally related to that as well too. I did. Well, listen, I know that your time is very valuable, and I have loved talking to you so much about so many things that I really do think we could be a force together to get some public policy changes
Yeah,
happening. I would
yeah.
love to do that. I also wanted to talk just before we left about if people think there's a situation in their home or in their family or their neighbor, someone that is going through a situation of neglect or financial abuse or physical abuse. There's a lot of information on the web, but there are immediate phone numbers that can be called. Do you, off the top of your head, remember the one from Australia? I have it here if you don't.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know it's 1-800-ELDER-ABUSE, which translates, I don't know what it translates to. 1-800.
Okay, I said had it right here, and now where are my pages?
I'll look at my keypad.
No, got it. I was like gonna end. Okay, I've got it right in front of my
Oh,
face.
yeah.
Okay,
I
so
have
1-800-353-374, which is 1-800-ELDER-HELP. Is that correct? Does that sound familiar?
Elder Help. Yes,
Help,
Elder Help.
help.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Elder Help.
And in the United States, it would be 1-800-677-1116. That would be the US equivalent. Or there are specially trained people like could take your call, answer your questions. There's also in the United States a national domestic abuse hotline, 1-800-799-7233. And of course, if there is an immediate situation in the United States, you would call 911. And in Australia, it's 000, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Dead.
That's it. Now I'm just triple checking. I know it's rude to be on my phone, but
No, I'm glad we're doing it. It's important.
I'm just triple checking. I don't know why I thought it was, gosh, I've got so many things open on this. Elder abuse or elder help. I think you're right. It's elder help, isn't it?
Help, HELP is important.
Yeah.
Elder help.
Yeah.
But I think if neighbors, family members look for symptoms where there's a emotional change in your loved one, if there are certainly bruises or unexplained physical things going on with them.
Just new friends,
New friends, hello.
Hello, new friends.
The new maintenance guy.
I know, you expect to be able to trust the people in that village, but it's hard. And sometimes it's just ageist attitudes. That's why if you go to the GP and he goes, oh, well, you're 90, what do you expect? But, being old doesn't mean ill health. It can mean, it can increase your ill health, but it doesn't mean it's so you don't want to be abused by neglect either.
Yeah, emotionally, my mother had an emotional life when she was well into Alzheimer's, and I got great joy in seeing her smiles and the happiness on her face. Emotionally, there was a life there, even though she had no idea who I was. you know, I
So
just
hard.
I just
Yeah.
wanted her happy, you know.
Yeah.
That's all we want for our parents. And I love you so much. I don't know you and I love you. Great.
Claire, well, I love what you're doing
Yeah.
too, and I think you're amazing. And I'm really, I feel privileged to have been on your Zoom, on your website, on your podcast,
Yeah.
and so thank you for talking about my book. And maybe we'll talk again. That would be great.
I would love to do that, Jean. All the
Yeah.
best to you.
And if anyone has any questions, do you do that? Questions and things?
You know what? I thought, oh, there, I can only say just go to our Facebook page because you have a Facebook page. But how would people get in touch with you? Do you want people getting in touch with you?
Oh, yes, I'm just hopeless. Our dog has more social followers than I do, and he's only 5 months old. I'm just hopeless. But yes, my aim is to improve. I see you are marvelous at it. So my aim is to improve my connection with people. Because after doing all this work on the book, and then people do want to follow through and email, and so I do have a Facebook. Leave a message. I'll get back to you. I promise.
Okay, so you are active on your Facebook page?
I wouldn't call it active, but I intend to be more active. So it's Jean Kittson with a double T, Kittson. Just leave me a message. I promise I will. And I usually, what I do is then just give people my emails because I'm very good on emails.
Well, thank you so much, Jean. I just love meeting you, and let's talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Would love to. Thank you.
Okay.
It was a great chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.